And when an athlete rolls their eyes or talks back, you want to clench your fist and you want to swing at them, but you know that you can't, because if you emotionally attach yourself to every athlete's choices, you will not survive your career. Provide the path, walk it yourself, invite others to join. Some will and some won't. But the ones who do will become the people that you built this system for in the first place. What's up, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Bonde on Cheer. My name is Bonde, and here we have honest conversations about coaching, business leadership, and long-term athlete development and cheerleading. So I recently had a conversation about something that's been sitting in the back of my head for a long time. Why does stoicism resonate with me so deeply? The discussion started with a simple philosophical question that humans have been trying to figure out since the beginning of time. What are feelings, and what should we do with them? Because on one side, we have emotions. And on the other side, we have agency, or our ability to choose how we act. And figuring out the relationship between those two things is basically the Stoic project, and has been the Stoic project for thousands of years. I'm about to do this whole podcast with the most wrinkly shirt, but I'm not going to let it stop me. I can't be bothered. I don't know what happened to it or what I did to it, but this is what I got. This is what I'm working with. So a lot of people think that Stoicism means suppressing emotions, and that is very far from what the Stoics actually believe. See, the Stoics believe that emotions happen in two phases. First, there's the initial reaction, and that is to some sort of stimulus. That could be an argument, somebody yells at you, an athlete rolls their eyes, talks back. Those feelings happen to us, right? They just happen. It's a reaction. You feel anger, you feel embarrassment, you feel rage, you feel all of these different things. That part is automatic. But then there's the second stage, and that is how much weight you decide to give to that feeling, or what you decide to do with that feeling, i.e. your response to that feeling. And this is what Epictetus meant. Epictetus is one of the big three Stoics. I might do like a whole Stoic philosophy thing here, but I want to dive into Stoicism and how it relates to coaching, because that's really the big tie for me here. So Epictetus said, men are not disturbed by things, but by the view they take of things. In other words, emotions themselves are not the problem. There's a stimulus, there's our initial reaction or the feelings that arise because of that stimulus, and then there is what we choose to do or how we choose to respond to the feelings from that stimulus. And there's a lovely Viktor Frankl quote. Well, really, it's a Stephen Covey quote. I think that's how you say his last name. He's the guy that wrote the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. He took a principle of Viktor Frankl's, which is essentially that between stimulus and response lies a space, and in that space lies your ability to choose, and therein lies your freedom, essentially. So we essentially are free human beings in that there's a space by which we get to choose our response to any stimulus that we experience in our lives. And I love that. I absolutely love that, because that is just the epitome of how we live our lives and how things happen to us. And when an athlete rolls their eyes or talks back, you want to clench your fist and you want to swing at them, but you know that you can't, and you have to choose how to respond as a mature adult or a coach that's going to hopefully lead to a productive outcome. And that is easier said than done. So the Stoics kind of believe that there's 3 ways that people handle emotion, so we can break them down. So the first one is emotional indulgence. This is where we believe that feelings are truth. If I feel wronged, something wrong happened. If I feel offended, that's because somebody did something offensive. This is where validation becomes the priority, and this is extremely common in modern culture. Then we have the second, which is emotional suppression. This is where we essentially stuff our feelings deep down and decide that we don't feel them. Feelings are seen as weakness, we ignore them, we push them down, we suppress them. And this is the stereotype that people associate with Stoicism, but this isn't Stoicism either. There isn't emotional indulgence in Stoicism, and there's no emotional suppression in Stoicism, but rather it's the third framework, and that's emotional regulation. And this is where psychology and neuroscience and Stoicism actually converge. And in this model, feelings are data, not commands, just data. It's just information. And what you do next is where Stoics believe one is stoic or not. You gather that information and that data, and then we decide how we're going to move forward. So the process looks like this. Notice the emotion, identify it, name it, understand what it's telling you, then decide how to respond. An example of that would be, I'm angry because I feel disrespected But then understanding and acknowledging the fact that being aggressive isn't going to help the problem. That is where they believe stoicism actually exists. That's the manifestation of stoicism. So the emotion informs you, but it's not the thing driving the car. When I really thought about why stoicism resonates with me, I realized it's because it's not about emotional suppression, it's not about emotional indulgence, it's about agency. And see, this whole idea of agency comes from what we would consider to be the dichotomy of control. And this is where we recognize what is in our control, what is up to us, and what is not. This is where I developed a framework that I like to call what is, what's yours, and what we influence. And this is sort of what I've called like the trichotomy of control, adding that third layer of influence. But it's important to understand the first two. So what are things we don't control? That would include items like other people, outcomes, reputations, events, the past, things of that nature. What is up to us are judgments, our values, our thoughts, our actions. Their claim was extremely simple, the Stoics, but very powerful. Freedom comes from focusing only on what is up to you. That idea resonates deeply with people who believe that personal responsibility is the fundamental rule of life. And that belief shows up everywhere in business and leadership and coaching. As a coach, I see this tension constantly. And every coach has experienced this. You have athletes who show up ready to work. And then you have athletes who show up and they joke around. They don't take warm-up seriously. They go through the motions. And the question becomes, do you try to force discipline or do you provide them with the tools and let them make the choice? Over time, I've leaned strongly towards the second. My job is to provide the opportunity. Their job is to decide whether or not to take it. Because the truth is, you can lead a horse to water, but you cannot force it to drink. And I said that one time to some of the kids, and they were like, no, I've never heard that before. I was like, you guys all know you can lead a horse to water, right? And they were like, you can lead a horse to water? And I was like, but you can't force it to drink? And they were like, no. I was like, well, that explains a lot. So this is where the useful distinction comes in. You cannot control other people. We talked about that. That's not what is yours. You get just what is. You cannot control other people, but you can influence them. Control means forcing them, and influence means shaping the environment. A good coach focuses on standards, rules and expectations, and culture. An example of that would be you as a coach create an environment where driven athletes thrive. Then athletes decide whether or not they want to be a part of it. Plain and simple. And interestingly, the thing that bothers the coaches the most isn't really the joking around. It's the lack of awareness of their part or role in a larger system that they're impacting, right? Like the team and the program. They're not just impacting themselves, they're impacting the coach who prepared the practice, the parents who are paying the money, the athletes who are actually trying to improve, and then their own future potential. It's a failure of perspective. And if you want to put this as eloquently as possible, philosophers would call this an immaturity of moral awareness. Young athletes often think in this frame, what do I feel like doing right now? They're not yet thinking about effort, opportunity, systems, and consequences. It's just not on their mind yet, and that's where the maturity comes in. And when you're somebody who can naturally see those systems, the behavior becomes extremely frustrating for obviously you as the coach and then the other athletes who are on the same page as you. And that really starts to seep into the culture and spread like a wildfire. So the paradox of coaching is this. You must care deeply about these athletes improving, while also understanding that some of them won't. If you stop caring, you're not a good coach. But if you expect all of them to change and improve, you'll burn out. The middle ground looks something like provide the opportunity, set the standards, then protect the environment and culture by enforcing those standards, and then accept the choice and choices of the athletes. Some athletes will rise to the standard and some won't. So on a personal note, something that I've noticed about myself is that when athletes start to goof off and joke around and not take warm-up seriously and be a little bit disrespectful in the way that they communicate or the way that they're treating their time and my time, I don't feel frustrated, I feel detached. And I've realized through reading and studying and just trying to understand that this is very consistent with the Stoic way of thinking. Detachment doesn't mean that I don't care. It just means that I'm drawing a line in the sand and a boundary of my responsibility and their responsibility. So my responsibility is for the standards, the participation, the effort I'm putting in, the system, the structure, the plan, the methods, right? And their responsibility is the focus, the attitude, the effort, and the improvement. Once you've done your part, the outcome then belongs to them. And that protects coaches from burnout. That mindset will protect the coaches from burnout. Because if you emotionally attach yourself to every athlete's choices, you will not survive your career. So Marcus Aurelius in Meditations wrote something that I think summarizes everything beautifully. And that is that you have control over your mind, not outside events. And notice what he's saying. He's not saying that life is going to be easy, coaching is going to be easy, these things are going to come easy. He's saying strength comes from recognizing where your power actually lies. And for coaches, that means focusing on the standards that you set and the environment you protect by enforcing those standards. And the example that you model as a coach. You let the athletes decide what they want to do with that opportunity. That is not up to you. You accept their choices. And when they make those choices, you have to enforce your standards, which oftentimes, unfortunately, means letting go of those athletes. It's not you giving up on them. They're just simply not upholding their responsibility, their end of the bargain, and that is not your fault. You cannot control that, but you do have to act on it. So the healthiest balance of this philosophy seems to be feel emotions fully. Understand the signal that they're providing, but don't let them dictate behavior. Choose actions that align with your values. Understand that emotion is just information. It's not authority. And in coaching, as in life, the best approach seems to be the one that the Stoics suggested about 2,000 years ago. Provide the path, walk it yourself, invite others to join. Some will and some won't. But the ones who do will become the people that you built this system for in the first place. Well, everybody, that was Stoicism as it relates to coaching and a little bit of my reflection on why this resonates with me so deeply and how I've seen it play out in my coaching and leadership throughout the years. I run the gym the same way that I run team practices, that I run privates. So I communicate with everybody equally and fairly. I set the standards, the rules and expectations. I enforce them to maintain the culture and protect the environment. And that's not just what coaches need to do at practice, but it's what they should do with their individual athletes and their parents and in their everyday life. Because you need to walk the walk, right? You have to create that path. You can then walk it. You invite others. And again, those that will become the people that you built the system for in the first place. So hopefully I was able to clear up some misunderstanding around Stoicism and how it can be a very impactful and positive philosophy to adopt and implement into your life. Not for everybody, not necessarily like end all be all, but just one that I found to be very impactful. So if you're looking for something that can help steer you in the right direction, I highly suggest looking into it. Read the books of the famous Stoics. There's many of them out there. Ryan Holiday is a great resource because he's like a modern day Stoic enthusiast to share all of these lessons and break these things down for better understanding. So that's it for me. Hopefully you guys enjoyed, and I will see you all in the next episode.